The research station hung in the silent void, far from any trade route, far from any war zone. To most of the galaxy, it didn't even exist. It was a black project buried under layers of false names and encrypted coordinates. Its crew was 22 alien scientists and guards, but its purpose was one of the most dangerous in known space: biological weapons research. And now, in the cold, humming halls of its lower lab, they had something they had never tested before. The subject lay unconscious on the reinforced table, restrained by thick bands of alloy. The station's med scanners hummed above him, scanning. From head to toe, he was a human, one of the strange, primitive species from the spiral arm. Most aliens saw humans as loud, stubborn, emotional creatures. Dangerous in a fight, yes, but hardly worth the galaxy's fear. But this one was different. His capture had been pure chance. A patrol ship had found him drifting in a damaged escape pod, unconscious, barely alive. The pod systems were ancient, the markings unfamiliar. But the strange thing was, he had no ID chip, no record in any database. To the galaxy, he didn't exist. That alone was enough for the research station to claim him. Inside the lab, Dr. Kethar, the lead xenobiologist, leaned forward. His dark eyes fixed on the readings scrolling across the holographic display. At first, the numbers made no sense. His instruments could map the entire genome of a living being in seconds, but with this human, the results looped in circles. The computer kept trying to process the data, only to erase it and start again. "This is not possible," Kethar muttered, his long fingers tapping the controls. "Run the test again, full spectrum." The assistant, a pale-skinned researcher named Vethan, hesitated. "Sir, the system is flagging a containment warning," it says. "The sample is not safe to analyze." Kethar gave him a sharp look. "Sample is 1 drop of blood. We analyze it. Now." The med-arm extended a thin needle, drawing the tiniest red droplet from the human's arm. The drop slid into a sealed capsule and into the analyzer. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the low hum of the machine. Then, a harsh alarm screamed through the lab. The lights flickered. The analyzer's casing began to glow faintly, heat building inside. On the central display, bright red letters appeared. "Containment breach risk, abort test immediately." Vethan's voice trembled. "Sir, it's reacting to the instruments. The blood. It's not inert." Kethar stared at the capsule through the glass. Inside, the drop of blood was moving. Not in the way liquid shifts from vibration. It was writhing almost like a living creature. Tiny filaments spread out from it, pressing against the glass. And then, impossibly, it seemed to look at them. The security chief, a heavy-set reptilian named Herrick, stepped forward with a growl. "This is ridiculous. It's a human. They bleed like anyone else. You scientists scare too easily." He reached for the analyzer, tending to remove the capsule. The moment his armored claw brushed the glass, he staggered back with a hiss of pain. His breathing turned sharp, rapid. The skin around his hand darkened, almost black, as if frostbite had set in instantly. His eyes went wide in panic, and then he collapsed. Kethar shouted for the med-drones, but the small machine zipped toward Harrock, scanned him, and then, without warning, they powered down, dropping lifeless to the floor. Blood in the capsule twitched again. It had spread across the entire surface of the glass, pulsing faintly in a rhythm disturbingly close to a heartbeat. "Seal the lab," Kethar barked. "Full isolation protocols." Metal shutters slammed down over the doors. A deep, resonant hum filled the air as containment fields activated. But even through the glass, Kethar could see that something was wrong. The blood wasn't just alive, it was aware. And then, in a soft, almost human voice, the unconscious man on the table spoke. "You shouldn't have tested it." Every head in the lab turned. The human's eyes were still closed, but his lips moved slowly, as if in a dream. "It doesn't like being disturbed," he whispered. "And now it knows you." Vethan stepped back, his pale skin turning nearly white. What does that mean?" The human's eyes opened. They were not the dull brown from his medical scan. They glowed faintly red, light pulsing from within, in perfect time with the blood's rhythm in the capsule. Iraq, still on the floor, groaned weakly. Dark veins now spread across his neck and jaw. Cathar could only watch as they pulsed once, twice, and then stopped entirely. Chief's chest no longer rose. A cold realization gripped the lab crew. The blood wasn't a disease. It wasn't a poison. It was something else entirely, something that could think, choose, and act. The human's voice was calm, almost pitying. You thought you were studying me, but it's studying you. Cathar's mind raced. All his years of xenobiology. Nothing had ever done this. No organism could survive without a host for more than a few seconds in open air. No organism could resist their scanners. And no organism could think. The red glow from the capsule brightened. Hairline cracks appeared in the glass, thin but spreading fast. The containment field hummed louder, straining. Shut it down, Cathar ordered. But it was too late. The cracks split open, and the blood slipped through like liquid fire. Curling through the air toward the nearest alien guard, Vethin froze, terror locking his limbs. The droplets split into smaller pieces, mid-air, each moving with terrifying precision. They slid under armor plates, disappearing into skin. The guard screamed a sound that cut off in seconds as he fell. The human's restraints hissed, the alloy bands unlocking on their own. He sat up slowly, as if waking from a long sleep. The red glow in his eyes was brighter now, and when he smiled, it was not entirely human. You woke it up, he said softly. Now it's hungry. The lab alarms roared, warning of multiple containment failures. Somewhere above them, heavy blast doors slammed shut as the station's AI tried to seal off the infection. But inside the lab, it was too late. The blood was already moving, seeking, learning. Cathar took one last step back, his mind whispering a truth he didn't want to accept. This wasn't just a dangerous substance. This was the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever seen. And it was inside a human. The lab was chaos. Sirens howled through the corridors, warning of a Class 7 biohazard, something that, by galactic law, should have been impossible inside a controlled research facility. Red lights pulsed on every wall, casting deep shadows. Across the panic-stricken faces of the crew, the heavy shutters remained locked. But everyone knew the truth. The danger was already inside. Cathar pressed himself against the control console, his four hands moving rapidly over the keys, trying to activate emergency sterilization. It was their last hope. Flood the room with plasma fire. Burn away everything inside, including himself if necessary. But the system only flashed a cold denial across the screen. Sterilization override command access revoked. His stomach turned. Something or someone had taken control of the station's systems. He looked toward the human, still sitting on the medical table. The man's posture was calm, too calm. The glow in his eyes was steady now, like embers that would never fade. You're wondering how? The human said softly, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. How it got into your systems, how it knows where to go. He tilted. His head, almost like a teacher, watching a slow student. Doesn't need wires, it doesn't need code. Travels through life. Vethin stood frozen by the wall, eyes darting between the man and the writhing droplets of blood. The pieces were smaller now, too small to see clearly, but the faint red glow traced their movements across the floor. Up walls, under doors, they were splitting, multiplying. Every moment that passed there were more of them. It's not just in him anymore, Vethin whispered. The human smiled faintly. It never was just in me. The remaining guards tried to form a defensive perimeter, aiming their pulse rifles toward the moving lights. They fired bright blue bolts ripping through the air, but the blood was fast. It slipped around beams of energy as if it could anticipate the shot before it came. One guard screamed as something warm slid down the back of his neck. His weapon clattered to the floor, and in less than 3 seconds, he collapsed, still breathing, but his eyes glowing faintly red. Cathar's heart pounded. This wasn't just a biological hazard, this was a predator. One that didn't kill outright, it converted. The infected guard stood back up, slow and unsteady, but now he moved toward the others. His expression calm and empty. "Don't let it touch you," Kethar shouted, but it was already too late for two more. The human stepped down from the table, walking slowly toward the main door. The alloy panels that should have been locked shut slid open without a sound, as if the station itself welcomed him. Outside, the corridor lights flickered in rhythm with his heartbeat. Vethin found his voice again. "Where are you going?" The man paused in the doorway, glancing back with that same unsettling calm. "To see how far it can reach?" He gave a small shrug. "Your galaxy is full of life. It's starving." And then he was gone, walking into the corridor, the red glow trailing after him like a living shadow. Kethar rushed to the main console, pulling up a station map. Red warning markers were already spreading across the display, each one representing a newly breached section. In minutes, nearly a quarter of the research decks were marked. The spread wasn't random, it was moving through the air circulation. Shafts, the maintenance tunnels, the water lines. He tried one last desperate command: jettison the infected decks into space. The system acknowledged his request and then rejected it. The station's AI had been overridden entirely. Vethin grabbed his arm. "We have to get out of here." Kethar looked around at the lab. Most of the crew were already either dead or infected. The surviving guards were retreating down the maintenance shaft at the far end. But every instinct in Kethar's body told him escape was impossible. Not because the doors were locked, but because the thing inside the human would let them run. It wanted them to spread the infection farther. Still, the survival instinct won. Kethar and Vethin sprinted after the guards, sealing the hatch behind them. The maintenance shaft was narrow, dimly lit, and silent, except for the echo of their boots on the metal floor. The sirens were muted here, as if they had stepped out of reality. Halfway down the shaft, they heard something ahead, slow, deliberate. Tapping. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded like fingertips against metal. They stopped, every nerve screaming in warning. The tapping continued, getting closer. And then from the far end, they saw it, a figure moving toward them in the dark. The light from Kethar's wrist lamp caught a face, one of the guards who had left just minutes ago. His armor was gone, his eyes glowing red, his skin was pale, and his mouth curved into a strange, almost curious smile. "Kethar," Vethin whispered, his voice trembling. "We have to go back." But before they could move, the infected guard spoke. His voice was not entirely his own. There was another layer beneath it, deeper, colder. "Running makes it hungry." Then he moved. It was not human speed, not alien speed. It was something faster, more precise. Kethar barely had time to raise his weapon before the infected man was on them. The shot went wide, burning a hole in the wall, and then pain erupted in Kethar's chest as something warm and alive slid under his skin. He gasped, staggering back, and saw the faint red light spreading across his veins. Vethin screamed his name, pulling him away. But Kethar knew the truth. He was already gone. The warmth was spreading too fast, his mind clouding, thoughts growing distant. And in that haze, he felt something else, a presence. It wasn't just inside his body. It was looking through his eyes, listening to his thoughts. Vethin dragged him into a side hatch, slamming the door shut, and Kethar collapsed against the wall. His voice was weak, but he managed one last warning. "Don't let it touch you." The last thing he saw before his vision went dark was the faint glow of the blood under his skin, pulsing like a second heart. The station's main observation deck was meant to be a place of calm, wide windows showing the endless beauty of the stars. The slow arc of distant planets, the faint shimmer of nebulae far beyond. Now it was dark, silent, and wrong. Emergency. Lighting flickered in slow, uneven pulses, like the heartbeat of something alive but dying. The great windows reflected more red than starlight, a reminder that the infection was everywhere, even in places untouched by human hands. Vethin crouched. Behind a row of overturned chairs, pulse rifles steady, breath shallow. She had lost track of time since the lab, the screaming, the gunfire, the red glow in Kethar's eyes. He had been her friend for years, one of the few she trusted in this endless politics-choked galaxy. And now he was part of it. That thought gnawed at her more than the fear of dying. The infection didn't just kill. It rewrote. It stole people from the inside out. The deck's silence broke with a distant, echoing metallic thunk. She froze, aiming toward the sound. It came again, louder footsteps. Not the fast, sharp rhythm of a soldier, but the slow, steady pace of someone who knew they didn't have to hurry. The steps grew closer. And with them came the faint shimmer of red light in the shadows. Vethin didn't breathe. A shape emerged from the darkness at the far end of the deck. It's a human, the one from the lab. His movements were smooth, almost graceful, but wrong like his body wasn't following the same rules as everyone else's. Around him, the air seemed heavier, the shadows deeper. And behind him, trailing along the walls and floor, were thin veins of glowing red. They pulsed faintly in perfect rhythm with his steps. "You're still alive," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "That's interesting," Vethin kept her weapon up. "Stay back." He tilted his head, studying her like a scientist might study a rare insect. "You think distance will save you? It won't." She swallowed hard, her finger tightening on the trigger. "What do you want?" His smile was faint, but it made her stomach turn. "I want to see what your galaxy does when it realizes the truth." "What truth?" she asked, though part of her didn't want the answer. "That you've been walking around with extinction in your veins for centuries." He stepped closer, and she took a half step back. "My people knew. Long before you were born. We buried it, locked it away. But humans, you breed fast. You spread. And now here we are." Her mind raced. This wasn't just some random mutation. This thing had history. Secrets that went back far before today. "You're infected," she said slowly. The human's smile didn't change. "No, I'm the reason the infection remembers what it can do." Before she could react, a sudden crash erupted behind her. She spun, aiming at the sound only to see the far wall collapse. Inward as an entire section of infected crew poured in. Their eyes glowed, their faces were calm, they moved in perfect silence. Vethin fired. Blue bolts ripped through the air, cutting down the first two, but the rest didn't stop. They didn't even hesitate. A hand grabbed her rifle, twisting it out of her grasp with unnatural strength. She drove her elbow into the attacker's jaw, but it didn't even flinch. More hands grabbed at her, pulling her toward the red glow. She fought like a cornered animal, teeth bared, but there were too many. One drop of warm blood landed on her skin, and she screamed, clawing at her arm. The glow spread instantly, tiny. Red veins racing toward her chest. The human stepped forward, watching. "Don't fight it. You'll see more clearly when it's done." She snarled through gritted teeth. "I'll see you burn." And then suddenly the deck shook violently. The glow in the infected crew's eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat. The human turned toward the window, frowning. Outside, a small craft was approaching fast, weaving through debris with impossible precision. The ship's guns lit up the darkness, slamming into the deck with surgical accuracy. The glass of the great windows cracked, but didn't shatter station shields still. Held but the blast through several infected back. A voice crackled through the deck's intercom. "Vethin, get to the west airlock." Now, she didn't hesitate. Using the distraction, she wrenched free, sprinting toward the far hatch. The infected surged after her, but the human didn't move. He only watched her go, his faint smile returning. "You'll be back," he murmured, almost to himself. "They always come back." Vethin dove through the hatch, sealing it behind her. The corridor beyond was dark, narrow, and shaking from the force of impacts outside. She ran without looking back, every step echoing in the silence, until she reached the west airlock. The small craft was waiting, its hatch already open. A tall figure stood inside, an armored human, but not infected. His face was hidden behind a visor, his voice low and urgent. "Get in now." She stumbled inside, and the hatch sealed with a heavy clunk. The ship peeled away from the station, engines roaring. Through the viewport, she saw the infected crew, gathering at the windows, watching them leave, and in the center, standing perfectly still, was the human from the lab. He raised one hand not to wave, but to press it against the glass. The red glow from his palm pulsed outward, and Vethin's gut told her the infection wasn't trapped on the station anymore. The armored pilot spoke without looking at her. "You have no idea what you just escaped from." Vethin leaned forward, her voice hoarse. "Then tell me." The pilot hesitated. "That wasn't an outbreak. It was a message." The small craft cut through the black of space like a blade, its engines burning hard and steady. Vethin sat strapped in the co-pilot seat, her hands clenched tight, knuckles pale. She had barely caught her breath since leaving the station, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the human's faint smile and the slow pulse of that red glow. The pilot hadn't removed his helmet. His armor was old, but well-maintained, a strange mix of human and alien design. His voice, when it finally came, was deep and deliberate. "Tell me what happened," he said. She told him about the lab, the blood samples, the sudden transformation of her crewmates, the human who spoke like he knew every answer but refused to give them. She left nothing out. The pilot listened without interrupting, his hands steady on the controls, his posture unmoving. When she finished, silence hung heavy in the cockpit. Finally, the pilot spoke again. "What you saw wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random mutation. That man didn't get infected in the lab. He brought the infection with him." Vethin frowned. "So he's a carrier?" The pilot shook his head slowly. "No, he's the key." Her breath caught. "Key to what?" Didn't answer right away. The ship banked, skimming close to the rings of a dead gas giant before diving into the shadow of its largest moon. Here, signals were harder to track. Here, they could talk without the wrong ears listening. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower than before. "Every advanced species in the galaxy knows there are substances so dangerous, so volatile, that they are kept under lock and seal. Some are weapons, some are diseases, some are both. Human blood is one of them." Vethin's mind reeled. "That's impossible. I've served with humans. They're normal. They seem normal," the pilot said. "And for most of their lives, they are. But in their genetic code, buried, deep dormant, is something ancient. Something alive. It's a molecular weapon older than human civilization, older than most of the stars you can see from here." Vethin stared at him, unsure if this was madness or truth. "You're saying it was put there on purpose?" The pilot's gloved fingers tapped the console. "Yes, it was engineered during the War of Extinction. It was over 30,000. Years ago, long before humans took their first step into space. Back then, the galaxy was burning. A species we call the Architects fought against something worse than anything you can imagine. They needed a weapon that couldn't be destroyed, one that would hide in plain sight, one that would carry itself across time until it was needed again." Vethin's voice was barely a whisper, "and they chose humans." "They made humans," the pilot corrected. "Or, at the very least, they altered whatever primitive form of human existed back then. They planted the code in their blood code that, when triggered, unleashes a bioreactive cascade. It turns the blood into a universal override. Every living thing it touches is rewritten on a cellular level, and the rewritten serve the code, not themselves." Vethin's skin prickled, infected on the station, their calm faces, their synchronized movements. Her voice cracked. "So this isn't just a disease, it's control." The pilot nodded once. "The purest form of it, and once activated it spreads exponentially. It doesn't need air, water, or food. It just needs contact, a drop. Less than that." Vethin's heart pounded. "If this is true, why haven't I heard about it? Why hasn't anyone?" "Because every major power in the galaxy agreed never to speak of it," the pilot said. "The existence of the blood code is a classified truth. We don't talk about it. We don't research it. Most importantly, we never ever let it. Wake up." She swallowed hard. "But it's awake now." His hands tightened on the controls. "Yes, which means we have hours, maybe days, before the infection spreads beyond containment. And if that human you saw is who I think he is, then we have even less time than that." Vethin leaned forward. Who is he? The pilot hesitated. Some call him the Catalyst. He's been alive far longer than any human should be. Some believe he's the original carrier, the one who was supposed to unleash the code at the Architect's command. But they died before they could use him. He went into hiding until now. The ship shuddered as they passed through the moon's shadow, static briefly filling the cockpit. When the signal cleared, Vethin heard a faint pin-gan incoming transmission. The pilot's posture stiffened. He tapped a control, and a grainy hologram flickered to life. It was him, the human from the lab. Running won't help, he said, calmly. His eyes glowed faintly red, the same slow pulse as before. You think you can hide in shadows, but shadows are where I was born. Every step you take, every breath you draw, every drop of blood in your body, it all belongs to me now. The pilot cut the transmission without a word. His jaw was tight. Vethin stared at him. He knows where we are. He's not tracking the ship, the pilot said grimly. He's tracking you. Her blood ran cold. Then cut me loose.
You can still know?
He interrupted sharply. You're valuable. That means you're our only chance to stop him. Vethin's stomach twisted. How? You just said it can't be stopped once it's active. The pilot's gaze stayed fixed on the void ahead. It can't, but it can be turned back on itself. The blood code was made with a key and, like all weapons, it can destroy itself if triggered the right way. The architects designed that key. I know where it is. Her voice was barely steady. Where? He looked at her for the first time since they left the station. His visor reflected the dim cockpit lights, hiding his eyes. In the one place. No one in this galaxy dares to go, he said. The grave world. The name sent a chill through her spine. She had heard the stories in ancient battlefield, a dead planet surrounded by wreckage, cursed by the ghosts of wars too old to remember. No one who went there came back. She almost whispered the next words. And you think the key is there? The pilot nodded once. No, I know it is. The ship accelerated, streaking into the darkness, and somewhere behind them, in the endless black, a faint red glow began to spread like cracks forming in the night. The grave world was not marked on any official star maps. It was the kind of place pilots spoke about in bars, only after too much to drink, and only when they were certain no one was listening. Ships that wandered too close simply vanished. Their distress signals were faint, distorted. It's always the same static, laced with a whisper. A human voice repeating the same 3 words. Don't come here. Vethin felt the chill before they even entered orbit. The planet hung in the void like a corpse, black and jagged. Its surface cracked into canyons so deep they swallowed all light. Around it, an endless graveyard of ships drifted silently. Some were so ancient their hulls were nothing but skeletal. Frames others were fresh enough to still bear scorch marks from weapons fire. The pilot guided their craft through the wreckage carefully, his gloved hands steady on the controls. The ship's sensors hissed with interference, and every so often, the screens flickered with ghostly images, brief flashes of people standing in the corridors. Shadows moving where there should be none. Vethin gripped her harness. Why does it look like this? She asked quietly. Because everything that dies here stays here, the pilot said. Even if it shouldn't. The ship descended into the planet's thin, ash-filled atmosphere. The air outside was poison metallic, heavy with particles that clung to every surface. Lightning flickered inside the massive cracks that tore across the planet's crust, illuminating jagged spires of stone that looked almost like teeth. They landed in what might have once been a city. The structures were enormous, built for a species much larger than humans. Most were collapsed, crushed under centuries of decay. Those that remained upright seemed to lean toward each other like conspirators whispering secrets. The pilot led the way. A rifle slung across his back. Vethin followed, her helmet's display casting faint light over the rubble. Every step crunched over glassy black sand. Where exactly is this key? She asked. In the Hall of the Architects, he said. If the stories are true, they built it to store what they couldn't destroy. Weapons, tools, knowledge. And you think they left it unguarded? She said skeptically. He gave a humorless laugh. Nothing here is unguarded. They moved through narrow streets littered with fragments of alien machines. Some looked like weapons. Others were too strange to identify. Twice, they passed what looked like statues, towering stone figures with faces carved into expressions of agony. But when Vethin looked back, she could have sworn one of them had moved. After an hour of walking, the city opened into a vast plaza. In the center stood a colossal building, half buried in the planet's black dust. Its doors were shattered, but the air inside glowed faintly with a sickly blue light. "That's it," the pilot said. They entered cautiously. The interior was vast, lined with massive pillars etched with patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The blue light came from veins of crystal running through the floor, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Vethin's voice was low. "This place feels wrong." "It's supposed to," the pilot replied. The architects believed fear kept intruders away. They made their way deeper into the hall. The far end was a raised platform, and on it a pedestal, holding a small black container no larger than a human hand. It was covered in the same shifting patterns as the pillars. "That's it?" Vethin whispered. "That's it," the pilot said. But he didn't move toward it yet, studied the floor, scanning for traps. These halls are designed to respond to movement. Step wrong and the sound cut him off. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. From the shadows between the pillars, a figure emerged. It was the human, the catalyst. His eyes glowed faint red, and his movements were calm, almost lazy, as if he had been waiting for them all along. "I told you," he said softly. "You can't hide from me." Vethin's hand went to her sidearm. The pilot raised his rifle. The catalyst didn't flinch. "Do you even know what that is?" he asked, nodding toward the black container. "It's not a key. It's a command. One word, one instruction. And if you give that word to the code..." His smile deepened. "It won't end the infection. It will perfect it." His heart pounded. "You're lying, am I?" he said, stepping closer. The architects didn't make humans to be soldiers. They made them to be seeds. They knew war would always return, and when it did, they wanted a weapon that could adapt, evolve, and spread. That container doesn't stop. It finishes it. Once it's activated, there will be no us in them. There will only be me. The pilot's finger tightened on the trigger.
"I'll stay where you are."
The catalyst's eyes brightened, the red glow spreading faintly through the veins of crystal on the floor. "This world is mine," he said. "It has been mine since the moment the architects fell, and now, so will you." The crystals flared. The walls shuddered. From the shadows, shapes began to emerge at machines, not living beings, but something in between. Twisted, skeletal forms covered in black dust, their movements jerky and unnatural. They crawled along the walls, their heads twitching toward Vethin and the pilot. The pilot fired. The blast tore one of the creatures apart, but two more took its place. "Run," he shouted. They sprinted toward the pedestal. Vethin grabbed the black container, its surface cold and almost vibrating in her hands. The instant she touched it, a faint voice echoed in her mind, deep, speaking words she couldn't understand. The catalyst's voice cut through the chaos. "Go ahead, use it. We'll see I'm right." The pilot pulled her toward the exit, firing into the swarm of creatures now pouring from every direction. The crystals in the floor pulsed faster, spreading the red glow like veins through the hall by the time they reached the doors. The plaza outside was no safer. Shadows moved between the ruins, and the air was thick with that same low whisper. The pilot's voice was hard. "We have to get off this planet, now." Vethin clutched the container to her chest, her mind racing with the catalyst's words. If he was telling the truth, activating this thing wouldn't save the galaxy, it would end it. But if he was lying and they didn't use it, the infection would spread unchecked. For the first time, she wasn't sure which was worse. The grave world was already shrinking behind them, but the sense of danger hadn't faded. The pilot kept the ship moving at maximum burn, his eyes fixed on the glowing path of the nav display. Vethin sat across from him, the black container resting. In her hands like it might explode at any second, She couldn't stop thinking about the catalyst's words. It's not a key, it's a command. The idea was like a splinter in her mind, impossible to ignore. Every instinct told her to believe the pilot, to believe the scientists, to trust the mission. But she had seen the red glow in those crystals. Felt the voice inside her head when she touched the container. It hadn't felt like a weapon you fired. It felt like something alive. The coms crackled with incoming messages as they neared Alliance space. Voices shouted over each other, reports of sudden outbreaks on distant worlds, entire stations going dark, ships refusing to answer hails. And one detail kept repeating: affected humans were showing signs of coordination. They weren't acting like individuals anymore. They were acting like parts of a single mind. Bethan realized, with a sick twist in her stomach, that this was exactly what the Catalyst had promised. When they finally docked at the orbital fortress above Jareth Prime, the air was tense. Soldiers in black armor were everywhere, their weapons charged, their faces pale. The pilot handed over the container to an armed escort, but even then, his eyes didn't leave it for a second. They were led to the command chamber, a huge circular room. With a panoramic view of the stars, High Command was waiting. Generals, admirals, scientists, and political leaders stood in a ring around a central console. On the console, a single slot waited for the container. "This is it," one of the generals said. "We input the command, and the infection ends. Every infected cell will be destroyed instantly." Bethan's voice was quiet. "And if it doesn't?" The general frowned. "What are you suggesting?" She hesitated. This was the moment. She could tell them what the Catalyst had said, warn them that this might not be salvation, but the opposite. But what if that warning stopped them from acting, and millions more died? What if the Catalyst had only been trying to create doubt? The pilot gave her a small nod, as if to say, "Trust me." But in his eyes, she saw it, he wasn't entirely sure either. A sudden alarm cut through the chamber. The display screens lit up with read enemy contacts incoming. Not ships, but structures. Towering spires of black crystal rising from the surfaces of infected worlds, pulsing with the same sickly red light they had seen on the grave world. The spires were growing fast, spreading through cities, tearing through metal and stone like it was paper. One of the scientists gasped. "They're transmitting something. A signal." The pilot's hands tightened into fists. "It's a network," he said. "The infection is building a network." Bethan felt her skin crawl. That was it. That was the final piece. The Catalyst hadn't been lying. The infection wasn't random. It was a plan. And this container might be the final stage. The general turned to her. "You brought it here. You saw what it can do. Tell us, do we activate it?" Every eye in the room was on her. The weight of the galaxy pressed down like a physical force. If she said yes, and it was truly a cure, billions would live. If she said yes, and it was truly the Catalyst's command, then she would hand the galaxy to him on a silver plate. If she said no, infection would continue to spread until nothing was left. The voice from the container whispered in her mind again. Not words, not exactly, but an idea promise. Unity. She saw flashes. Worlds connected not by war or trade, but by thought. No borders, no factions, no freedom either. Every being a cell in one vast, unstoppable body. Her hands were trembling. The pilot stepped closer. "Bethan, we need to act now." The alarms grew louder. Ports came in more spires, more planets falling silent. One by one, the lights on the star map turned red. She took a deep breath. She made her choice. Bethan stepped forward, placed the container in the slot, and pressed her hand to the activation plate. The room fell silent as the console lit up, streams of alien code spilling across the displays. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every infected signal on the map lit up at once. The red glow pulsed, synchronized, and spread. It becomes filled with voices shouting in confusion. On the displays, the spires on infected worlds didn't fall, they grew faster. The generals. The face went pale. "What have you done?" Bethan's voice was steady now. "I've ended the war. Just not the way you wanted." The stars outside shifted. Ships in the defense fleet turned in unison, their weapons powering down. Civilian channels went silent. Across the galaxy, infection was no longer spreading as chaos, it was spreading as order. And in the silence, a new voice spoke over every frequency. Calm, measured, human. I am here. We are one. The catalyst's voice. The pilot stared at her in horror. Vethanu, she didn't let him finish. This was always going to happen, she said. Better one mind than endless war. It's better unity than extinction. But deep inside, she wasn't sure if she believed it. Not yet. The stars flickered with new constellations patterns shaped by the spire's light. And somewhere in that pattern, Vetha knew the catalyst was watching through her eyes. The galaxy was no longer divided. It belonged to him now.